Don't live in fear. Listen to the cries from those relatives. Come forward with information.
But at the end of the day, we want this brother to know we will not rest until you're held accountable for this crime. And this was a wicked crime, and a crime against women, and a crime against humanity.
Very, very difficult for me as a father, know that I'm not going to see my daughter ever again and ever talk to her again.
That's a father learning the worst news a parent can ever get.
We will not rest until you have been arrested. We want the suspect to know that we're going to look for you night and day, brother, until you are arrested.
And that's the promise a whole city made to the man behind it. A man who, to this day, has never spent one single night in a jail cell for what he did. Before this story is over, you're going to hear how this man ordered a saw the same morning she vanished, how he typed the words, "how to be a serial killer," into his own phone, and how the police literally had their hands on him during a traffic stop and then let him drive away. But to understand how bad this really got, you've to go back to the beginning, to a young woman who flew across the country to enjoy her birthday and never came home. Felicia Johnson was 24 years old, and she came from the San Diego, California area where her family lived. Her father, Kevin, described her as the kind of person who was responsible almost from birth, someone who brought light into every room she walked into. She loved doing hair and makeup, loved glamour, and had real dreams about modeling and dancing. Around the 10th of April in the year 2022, she celebrated her 24th birthday with the people who loved her back home.
Take a flick. Come on, take a flick. Yeah, I got Bel Air and as a whole.
A few days after that, she got on a plane to Houston, Texas, and checked into the Intercontinental Hotel over in the medical center part of the city. As far as her family knew, this was just a young woman going out of town to have a good time and chase a little opportunity while she was at it. The trip mixed the birthday celebration with looking for work, and one of the places she went to was a gentleman's club called Cover Girls, where she reportedly tried to get hired as a dancer and was turned away. In the earliest days of the search, that club was the center of everything, and a reporter stood right outside of it to lay out the last confirmed sighting anyone had of her.
Johnson got into an unknown man's car when an Uber ran late, and that the club has not provided surveillance video or any other information.
Now here's where the story turns cold, so stay with me, because the club was only the surface. The real timeline that investigators pieced together points somewhere much darker than a night out that went wrong. Court documents say Felicia had connected with a 28-year-old Houston man named Chukwuebuka Nwobodo on an escort website, and the two of them agreed over Snapchat to meet up for a $500 payment. This wasn't some stranger she happened to cross paths with on a dance floor. This was arranged ahead of time, set up through a phone screen, the money already agreed on before they ever laid eyes on each other. And the way he moved her that night tells you exactly how careful and how calm this man was. In the early morning hours of April 16th, around 3 o'clock in the morning, the plan went into motion. Nwobodo didn't drive over and collect her himself. He requested an Uber using his own phone and email, and that car carried her from the hotel out to an apartment complex on Windchase Boulevard. He let a rideshare driver handle the part that carried the most risk, so there would never be any footage of his own car sitting outside her hotel. She climbed into that Uber alive. Surveillance cameras caught her stepping out of it and walking into the building, moving under her own power, with no idea what was waiting for her. From there, he took her from her hotel to his own apartment at 14,935 South Richmond Avenue, less than 2 miles away, and investigators say that's where he killed her. That apartment is the last place Felicia Johnson was ever alive, and what this man did in the hours right after should erase any doubt that this was some argument that spun out of control in the heat of the moment. That very same morning, Nwobodo went and got medical treatment for deep cuts on his own hand and told the staff he'd hurt himself opening boxes. Shortly after, surveillance cameras caught him at Walmart and Home Depot, hand still bandaged, buying a saw, a flashlight, gloves, trash bags, and towels. And on top of all that, he pulled $500 out of his Wells Fargo account. While all of that was unfolding, her family back in California was moving from worried to terrified, because the last time they'd heard her voice was April 15th, and now she'd gone completely quiet. Her father didn't sit at home and wait by the phone. Kevin Johnson flew from California to Houston within about 12 hours, hired a private investigator, teamed up with the Houston activist Quanell X, and the family even set up a fundraiser to help cover the cost of searching for her.
The man says he'll stay in Houston as long as it takes to find his missing daughter. 24-year-old Felicia Johnson disappeared 10 days ago, and her father says a reward may be increased in order to bring in more tips. Jason Miles is live from Bear Creek Park, where Johnson's family says her phone was found. Jason?
That's right, Lynn. A PI hired by the family claims he found Johnson's phone covered in blood here at Bear Creek Park. Further reason the family believes foul play is involved. Flyers like this are posted at Bear Creek Park, where 24-year-old Felicia Johnson's family says her bloody phone was found, while her father, Kevin, continues to keep her name in the news.
I'm her father, I'm the face of her, and I'm her representative in her fight to come home.
He came to Houston from his home in San Diego after getting word of Felicia's disappearance.
And nobody's gonna fight this fight more than me, harder than me, and longer than me.
He says his oldest of 3 children was last seen April 15th at Cover Girls Gentlemen's Club on West Little York, where she applied for a job days after coming to town from California to celebrate a birthday and earn some extra cash.
She fell into something that she couldn't get out of.
He was on the ground in a strange city, chasing any lead he could find, running on nothing but fear and love. There was even a grim logic to where that Uber dropped her, because Nwaobodo had once lived in that same Windchase Boulevard complex before he moved over to his South Richmond apartment, so he knew the area very well. And while the family was falling apart, he stayed eerily calm. The very next day, April 17th, investigators say he was still out making supply runs, quietly adding to everything he'd already bought. While he was casually stocking up, Felicia's people were doing the exact opposite of calm. Quanell X and his organization stood in front of cameras demanding answers.
She called the Uber. Uber was taking too long to really get here. So a gentleman here at the club offered to give her a ride to where she needed to go. Felicia has not been seen since. No cell phone activity, no credit card activity, no social media activity. She has absolutely just vanished off the face of the earth.
Prayer vigils were held back home in San Diego, and the family begged anybody in Houston who had seen anything to come forward before it was too late.
New calls being made tonight for the public's help in finding the man accused in the disappearance of Felicia Johnson. Johnson was last seen at the Cover Girls nightclub on West Little York Road back in April. Community activist Quanell X and the Rainbow Coalition spoke out tonight, calling for justice in the case. Police are now searching for 28-year-old Chukwuebuka Nwaobodo. He is charged with murder and tampering with evidence.
We will not rest until you have been arrested. We want the suspect to know that we're going to look for you night and day, brother, until you are arrested. We want the suspect to know that the no snitch policy will never protect you in our community.
And then came the first hard piece of proof that something truly terrible had happened. That private investigator and a family friend were tracking Felicia's phone, and the last spot it pinged sent them clear across town to a public park. Her blood-covered iPhone and her purse were recovered near Bear Creek Pioneers Park, roughly 25 miles away from the hotel where she'd been staying. Her phone, covered in blood, tossed into a public park along with her belongings, discarded like trash so nothing could be traced back to the man who did this.
Johnson got into an unknown man's car when an Uber ran late. The club has not provided surveillance video or any other information. Meanwhile, Texas EquiSearch spent hours in the area where Johnson's phone was found and tells me it will continue to follow law enforcement's lead on when and where to search. At this point, HPD considers it a missing persons investigation.
That was the moment this stopped being a missing person and became something far worse. But the piece of this story that turns your stomach the most is still ahead. In the days after Felicia disappeared, Nwaobodo sat at his phone and typed out a string of searches that read like a step-by-step guide for getting away with murder. He searched for things like, can bleach destroy DNA? What does vinegar do to blood? How to delete your history completely, and the most forested part of Houston. He also searched how to plan a murder without getting caught, how to get away with murder outright, and in some summaries of the case, how to be a serial killer. There was also a warning sign in his past that would help police put a name to all of this. Back in November of 2020, Nwobodo had been investigated by Houston police for a sexual assault, a case that was dropped after the alleged victim chose not to press charges, and it was the address on that old report that later helped investigators tie him to Felicia's case. Then came May 13th, and this is the day that Felicia's family has never been able to make peace with. Houston police had already built enough of a case to get an arrest warrant and search warrants for his car and his apartment, and during a traffic stop that day, officers looked inside his vehicle and found blood in the trunk and the back seat, a handgun, loose latex gloves, a shovel, and a large kitchen knife. And then, somehow, after all of that, he was taken into custody and later released. They had him dead to rights in that moment, and still let him walk right back out into the world like it was nothing. For Kevin, the father, that single decision turned his grief into a nightmare that wouldn't switch off, because in his mind, the danger didn't die with his daughter. It walked free, and it kept breathing.
Johnson went missing after taking a trip to Houston for her 24th birthday.
I felt like that could have killed me. Just to find out like that, what happened to her, and the information.
Her father, Kevin, alongside Felicia's stepmother, Myra, speaking to us via Zoom from San Diego, trying to grasp a reality that doesn't feel real.
Very, very difficult for me as a father, know that I'm not going to see my daughter ever again and ever talk to her again.
This is the man police say is wanted for Felicia's murder, 28-year-old Chika Upaka Unwubudu. Court documents reveal Johnson had met Unwubudu online and later sent an Uber to her hotel in the medical center, where she was eventually taken to his South Richmond apartment. Investigators say they found DNA matching Felicia's at his apartment, and in his car, a gun, knife, and shovel. Details her father is still working to process.
I've been dealing with depression. I've been dealing with severe PTSD, anxiety, hypertension, high blood pressure, you name it.
The investigation would go on to find Unwubudu bought cleaning supplies and made internet searches, including how to be a serial killer. Court documents say Houston police pulled Unwubudu over in a traffic stop on May 13th, but he was later released. There are still questions into why police let him go.
When the search of that apartment came back, it only made the picture uglier. Investigators found bloodstains on the bedroom and hallway floors that matched Felicia's DNA, and when they dug through his seized phone, they didn't just find those searches. They found a photo of a dismembered woman, photos of the exact Uber pickup spot and the vehicle, and 3 more photos of dead people who have never been identified. On June 9th of 2022, the paperwork finally caught up with the man, even though the handcuffs never did. Nwobodo was formally charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence in Harris County, and Houston police put out a public wanted notice describing him as extremely dangerous. A reward of up to $5,000 was put on the table for anyone who could help bring him in.
Newly released documents are revealing shocking and gruesome details about the murder and disappearance of 24-year-old Felicia Johnson. She vanished in April. Fox 26's Gabby Hart is live tonight with news that police say the suspect's Google search history is being used as evidence against him. Gabby.
Yeah, Tom, charging documents reveal that after Felicia Johnson's disappearance, the suspect Googled things like how to be a serial killer and how to get away with murder. Police also say that they found photos in his cell phone that showed the body of a dismembered woman along with other dead bodies.
New documents are providing insight into the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of 24-year-old Felicia Johnson. Johnson came to Houston from San Diego and attempted to get a job at a local strip club. We're now learning that she allegedly met 28-year-old Chukwuebuka Nwobodo. The pair agreed to meet for $500. The suspect sent an Uber for Johnson to the Intercontinental Hotel around 3 a.m. April 16th. That Uber took her to the suspect's old address on Windchase Boulevard. Police say the suspect picked her up from that location and took her to his new residence on Richmond Avenue. On Thursday, police saying they found evidence that leads them to believe she was murdered. That evidence revealed in these documents. On April 17th, the suspect purchased a saw, towels, large trash bags, and a trail flashlight. When officers searched his vehicle, they found a gun, latex gloves, a large kitchen knife, and a shovel. They also found Felicia's in his trunk and back seat, as well as stains throughout his apartment. After Felicia's disappearance, the suspect allegedly Googled things like what does bleach do to blood, how to be a serial killer, and how does one plan a murder without getting caught. On April 30th, nearly 2 weeks after Felicia's disappearance, the suspect's Google search revealed he was still looking for Houston escorts. The investigating detective saying, quote, "I believe Felicia is deceased and was likely dismembered." On May 13th, nearly 1 month after Johnson's disappearance, police arrested Nwobodo, at which point they went through his phone, where they say they found a photo of a dismembered woman and 3 other photos of dead bodies. We also learned that the suspect was previously investigated for attempted sexual assault. The victim chose not to press charges.
Now, right now, it's not clear why the suspect was arrested and then released from custody. We do know, though, that tonight that suspect is on the run, wanted on charges of murder and tampering with evidence. Felicia Johnson's body still hasn't been recovered.
But a charge printed on paper doesn't lock a door on a man that nobody can find, and there was a very real fear he'd slipped out of the country altogether. Tips suggested he may have fled to Nigeria, where he has family ties and where there's an extradition treaty with the United States, though none of that has ever been confirmed. When prosecutors formally filed the case, it landed in Harris County's 232nd State District Court, and his wanted poster went out with a booking number and a warning in bold that he should be treated as armed and extremely dangerous. Crime Stoppers of Houston kept his face in circulation for years, featuring him in the campaigns they run to catch killers who slip through the cracks. Yet every month that passed with no arrest only sharpened the same fear the family had carried from the very beginning, that the longer he stayed free, the colder the trail would grow, and the easier it would become for him to disappear for good in a country on the other side of the world. Through all of it, one voice refused to let Felicia's name fade into the background, and he made her case a warning for every young woman who might get lured the same way she was.
Right now, police are looking for the man they say killed Felicia Johnson. She's a California woman who disappeared while visiting Houston more than 8 weeks ago. Ugochi Loka has been following this case since Johnson went missing in early April. Ugochi, good morning to you. What have you learned?
Steph, good morning. You know, it's news we were hoping just wasn't true when we heard about it. And Houston police, they do confirm they believe that this missing 24-year-old woman who was reported missing before was in fact murdered. And they say they believe it happened here. Now, this is an apartment complex off of South Richmond Avenue. Take a look at your screen. This is the suspect, 28-year-old Chukwu Ebuka Nwobodo. Investigators say Felicia was visiting from California when she was reported missing back on April 16th after her body phone was discovered at Bear Creek Pioneers Park. Houston police tell us Nwobodo picked Felicia up from an apartment complex on Windchase Boulevard and took her to his apartment here on South Richmond Avenue. Investigators say they found evidence that Nwobodo killed her here before getting rid of her personal belongings at the park and disposing of her body. Quanell X, who's been helping Felicia's family, weighs in.
We need you young sisters to look at these cases like Felicia Johnson and realize that your life can be taken from you in the blink of an eye by some sick-minded individual. We will not rest until you have been arrested.
For nearly a year, though, the one thing the family wanted most felt impossible because Felicia's body was still out there somewhere and nobody could bring her home. Then, in February of 2023, that finally changed. A landscaping contractor working out in the Sam Houston National Forest in Montgomery County came across human remains, and the condition of them lined up with the dismemberment investigators had feared from the start. Out in the deep woods, the exact kind of hidden, forested place he'd searched for on his phone. Kevin knew in his gut it was her before any lab result ever came back. And soon after, DNA and dental records officially confirmed that the remains were Felicia's.
Tonight, a father believes the remains of his daughter, who went missing nearly a year ago, may have been found.
They wouldn't have notified me if they didn't think it was her. I believe it's her.
Johnson says Houston police notified him Wednesday that remains, strongly believed to be that of his 24-year-old daughter Felicia, were found in Montgomery County.
The jury was on the body. That was hers. We're just waiting for the dental records to, actually have the 1,000%.
He says they're still waiting on the medical examiner's office to officially confirm, but are looking forward to the day they can lay Felicia to rest.
It's a blessing. It's a score for us. It's a score for the family. Whenever they release her, then I will be able to have a service for her and pay her the respects that she needs.
Those remains in Montgomery County have still not officially been identified. The Justice of the Peace there told us tonight he was on scene Tuesday when skeletal remains were found, along with a trash bag that's now been collected as evidence.
Pieces of crime scene tape can still be seen not far from Katie Francis's house.
It's kind of creepy.
She lives at the edge of the Sam Houston National Forest.
Sometimes there's garbage bags where people dump stuff like that out, but oh gosh, it's probably been 30, 40 years since we heard of them finding anybody else up there.
But Tuesday afternoon, they may have found someone. From Drone 11, you can see the path off Highway 149 near Flamingo Lakes, where the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office says a TxDOT worker discovered human bone remains.
But finding her body isn't the same thing as getting justice, and Kevin has never once let anybody confuse the two. Even while carrying that depression and severe PSD, the only thing he keeps asking the world for is that the man responsible finally be caught.
I was in anguish, I still am, because I want the perpetrators to be caught.
And now that her remains have been found, many hope this brings her family one step closer to getting the closure they deserve.
Instead of letting that anguish swallow him whole, Kevin and his family began working to start a foundation in Felicia's name to help women and girls who get lured into sex trafficking, so the same trap that caught his daughter might catch a few less of somebody else's. And that's where this first case leaves us. Now, here's why I told you this story first. Because as sick as it's, Chukwuebuka Nwobodo isn't the only man who used a rideshare to lure a young girl to his home, killed her, and then calmly went shopping for the tools to take her apart. And if you know anything at all about where Chukwuebuka Nwobodo is hiding, please contact the Houston Police or Crime Stoppers, because there's still a father in California waiting on the justice he was promised a long time ago.
I just feel lost. I don't even know what to do.
Please keep them in her and their prayers. It's a lot for all of us. I know everyone had their relationship with Bree, whether it's, for a second, for years, for weeks. I know I only knew her for 3 months, and it hurts me dearly.
On the morning of April 6, 2023, a superstar's daughter fell to the ground as she bled out in front of her toddler. This was 23-year-old Brianna McCoy, who lay dead from gunshot wounds. Nearby, her 18-month-old son Xander was found alive, still in his playpen, left alone in the aftermath of an unspeakable act of violence. The police arrived at the Coachlight Square complex, where they uncovered the devastating scene and discovered an important clue. Brianna had been killed by her boyfriend because she dared to tell him the truth he didn't want to face. After shooting Brianna in the apartment they shared, the suspect fled and ignited a national manhunt that revealed that this was far more than a crime of impulse. It was a warning sign everyone had missed. This is the life and death of Brianna McCoy. Her tragic story unfolds in Bridgeport, Connecticut, USA. It is a diverse and evolving city with a strong sense of community, a rich immigrant culture, and scenic parks along the Long Island Sound. In 2023, despite new developments, the city still struggled with high violent crime rates, including aggravated assaults and robberies. Brianna Destiny McCoy was born on September 22, 1999. She was the daughter of Camille Prince and internationally known Jamaican dancehall icon Ricky Trooper, whose real name is Garfield McCoy. While her father's name carried weight in the reggae world, Brianna was intent on carving her own identity, one rooted in motherhood, independence, and quiet strength. She stayed close to her family and built her own small circle of friends. Known affectionately by some as Bree Balenciaga, she was described by her loved ones as sweet, gentle, and full of light. Brianna was close to her cousins, who admired her reserved nature despite her father's status. But those were not her only virtues. Brianna wasn't flashy or loud, but genuine, kind, and loving. She was the type of person whose laugh lingered in your memory and whose presence lit up any room she entered. Though young, Brianna was building a life for herself and was already making a name for herself. She had recently started working at In the City, a local tapas bar and lounge known for its energetic nightlife and stylish crowd. She worked as a bottle server, but she carried herself with grace. But even as she poured into others, she was missing out on a certain part of life. Soon she met a man who took her life down a totally different path. 41-year-old Derek Francis, also known as Ainsley Forbes, was twice Brianna's age. He was trouble from the onset, but he was trouble she was willing to deal with. The couple was wrapped up in each other and lost in the chemistry. Soon, their relationship created a new role for Brianna that she simply adored. She soon started to balance the pressures of motherhood. Her son Xander was the center of her world. Brianna was focused on her son, providing for him, protecting his future, and doing everything in her power to improve their lives. For a while, it was easy to ignore the cracks that had started to form in their relationship, but she could not forget Derek's past. Derek had a criminal history and was a convicted felon. Though originally from Jamaica, he had been living in the U.S. and was already known to Bridgeport police. Police had already responded to their home on multiple occasions. Their once affectionate relationship soon started to turn into something far more volatile. On several occasions, the couple could be overheard in muted fights and arguments. It was clear to anyone within a mile radius that there was abuse going on within their home. But Brianna still hoped that the man she had fallen in love with, who had given her a beautiful child, would return. But the more she waited, the worse it got. On February 23, 2023, there had been a domestic disturbance call to the police. That call was one of several, confirming what those close to her already knew. The relationship had become dangerous, and Brianna was doing something about it. Brianna had reportedly ended it and was trying to reclaim her space and peace. Her family started to notice that the couple's bond had long been strained, marked by volatility and control. But ending the relationship didn't mean escaping the threat, and Brianna was going the extra mile to avoid this. While cleaning out her daughter's apartment, her mother, Camille, found something she could barely bring herself to read: a handwritten to-do list. Among the errands and reminders, Brianna had written a note to apply for a gun permit. Obviously, Brianna feared for her life and was trying to protect herself. Sadly, she would never get the chance to finish that list. On the morning of April 6th, a neighbor inside the Coachlight Square condo complex reported hearing an argument coming from Brianna's unit. It wasn't the first time. This neighbor had overheard multiple fights between Brianna and Derek before. But this time, something was different. She heard Brianna shouting, begging for it to stop. Her voice rose in panic. Then came the sound that would silence everything. A single, deafening gunshot rang out, followed by a chilling stillness. Moments later, the neighbor saw Derek exiting the apartment. She stepped forward and told him what many had likely wanted to say for months. She told him he needed to stop putting his hands on Brianna. In response, he simply said he knew and apologized. Then he calmly walked away. Concerned, the neighbor went in to check on Brianna, but what she found inside would be burned into her memory forever. Brianna lay, motionless, close to her son's playpen, with blood pooling beneath her. Her son Xander remained in his playpen, wide-eyed and silent. With a loud scream, this neighbor raised the alarm and called the police. By the time police arrived, the damage had already been done. Bridgeport officers arrived shortly before 11:30 a.m. They found Brianna in her bedroom, shot 4 times in the head and upper body with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Xander was physically unharmed, but emotionally traumatized, left in the apartment with his mother's body for an unknown length of time. What that child saw and heard that morning will remain with him for life.
He wasn't even expected to live, and she took excellent care of him to the point where he's now. And he was her pride and joy. Please help the police with any given information. Telling myself she's probably away and will be returning soon.
Brianna McCoy was dead in a horrific way, and there was work to do. The apartment was sealed off. Detectives swept the scene, photographing bullet casings, collecting evidence, and noting the location of Brianna's body. But while investigators gathered physical evidence, their most urgent clue had already slipped away. Derek Francis had vanished. Bridgeport police wasted no time naming him the primary suspect. He was the last known person to see Brianna alive and had a documented history of domestic incidents involving her. An arrest warrant was issued within hours. But Francis was already moving, and every hour made him harder to catch. This led the police to notify enforcement across multiple states. Soon, the U.S. Marshals Violent Fugitive Task Force joined the case. Francis was officially considered a fugitive. Officers believed he was armed, unpredictable, and capable of more harm. The urgency intensified, and the manhunt was not letting up. For days, police tracked leads across the region. Then, on April 11th, 5 days after Brianna's death, officers in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, pulled over a vehicle tied to one of Francis's associates. He was inside, but instead of surrendering, he ran. He made it only a short distance before he was on the ground and in cuffs. Francis was booked into the Cuyahoga County Jail and held as a fugitive from justice. Initially, he refused to waive extradition, delaying his return to Connecticut. But after several days, he made a different choice. On April 17th, he was escorted back under armed transport. Connecticut would now begin building the case to make sure he never walked free again. At his first court appearance, prosecutors laid out a preliminary overview of the evidence. The courtroom was tense, with Brianna's family present and watching closely. Emotions ran high, but the facts were even heavier, because everything pointed to a premeditated act, and the proof was piling up. Authorities had recovered a 9mm semi-automatic handgun under the passenger seat of the vehicle Francis had fled in. Ballistics testing confirmed it matched the cartridge casings recovered from Brianna's apartment. That weapon was crucial evidence, but this was not all the prosecution had. In addition to the physical evidence, prosecutors presented eyewitness accounts. A neighbor had heard the fatal argument and seen Francis fleeing the apartment. Others had heard previous fights between the couple and confirmed repeated signs of distress. Each testimony added another layer to the picture investigators were building.
23? 23 is like you're not even started with life. That's the saddest thing you can imagine.
It's just heartbreaking that a young life has been lost.
All the people want to show me love and, send condolences to me and the family through that trying time. And that's why the people don't say, yo, bonafide, respect all I own and thanks to the love, but it hard for answer so much phone calls and messages. It's like at the first.
Francis opted to be tried by a panel of 3 judges instead of a jury. His attorney informed the court that the defense would argue he acted under extreme emotional disturbance. This approach aimed to reduce the murder charge to manslaughter, a bold move that quickly proves hard to establish. To make that defense, his attorney would need to convince the court this was a breakdown, not a calculated decision. The court was prepared to entertain this, so they put him to the test. A psychiatrist was appointed to evaluate Francis. The defense claimed the relationship had emotionally destabilized him and that his actions were not intentional, but the result of a mental crisis. The doctor was expected to return a full psychological report. Meanwhile, the state prepared to dismantle that argument with facts. Francis had already changed his story more than once. At first, he claimed Brianna had the gun. Later, he said he discovered it while looking for money she had supposedly hidden. Prosecutors pointed to the inconsistencies as evidence of manipulation. They believed the story was being rewritten to fit a defense, not the truth. In the weeks leading up to the trial, additional history had surfaced. Brianna had contacted police on multiple occasions, including a documented domestic incident in February, just weeks before her death. She had ended the relationship. She was making plans for independence, and prosecutors believed Francis killed her to stop her from leaving. The court heard from law enforcement, forensic experts, and Brianna's family. They reviewed the child's trauma, the neighbor's eyewitness account, and prior records that suggested a long pattern of volatility and control. Things started to look bad for Francis. Each new fact chipped away at the emotional disturbance defense. The trial proceeded in April 2025. Over several sessions, the judges reviewed all submitted materials. Xander's condition, including his ongoing speech therapy, was entered into the record as part of the crime's lasting impact. The judges now had everything they needed to decide whether this was murder or a moment of mental collapse. The long-awaited time had come, and everyone was eager for the verdict. On April 25, 2025, the panel delivered its verdict: guilty of murder. The claim of emotional disturbance was rejected. The court concluded that Francis had full awareness of his actions and had shown intent both during and after the shooting. He hadn't lost control, he had simply refused to let go. Next, the heavy sentence was delivered. On June 5th, the final sentence was announced: 55 years in prison. The penalty reflected the gravity of the crime, the vulnerability of the child witness, and the history of prior abuse. But for Brianna's family, no sentence could restore what they had lost. Camille Prince, Brianna's mother, had attended nearly every hearing, every update, and every painful recounting of her daughter's final hours. In the end, she got the justice she had waited for. Francis was going to prison, possibly for the rest of his life. But no outcome could undo what had already been done. Brianna's father, Ricky Trooper, had mourned his daughter publicly and privately. On the anniversary of her death, he expressed the weight of his grief, stating that the pain had only worsened over time. His daughter had been taken suddenly, violently, and in front of her own child. This had inflicted the boy with a heartbreaking disability. Xander, the child left behind, was not speaking. Since the shooting, he had remained silent. Therapists diagnosed his trauma as a stress response to witnessing the violence. He was only 18 months old at the time, but the emotional impact was already visible. Every therapy session was a reminder of what he had seen and what he had lost. Camille later confirmed that Xander was receiving consistent care, but recovery was slow. His routine had changed entirely. New home, new guardianship, new structure. As he aged, a time would come when questions would have to be answered, and the people who loved him most would eventually have to explain how his mother died. In the days following the murder, the city of Bridgeport responded. A vigil was held outside in the city, the lounge where Brianna had worked before her death. Friends, family, and even strangers gathered with candles, posters, and messages of remembrance.
Family, we just want to thank everyone for being here. We want to send our Bree's son, her family, especially her mom who's present. Please keep them in their prayers. It's a lot for all of us. I know everyone had their relationship with Bree, whether it's, for a second, for years, for weeks. I know I only knew her for 3 months, and it hurts me here. We love you, Bree!
More than 40 people stood outside the lounge, releasing pink and blue balloons into the night sky. Photos of Brianna were displayed on a screen. Attendees described her kindness, her calm demeanor, and her deep love for her son. Friends described how Brianna had carried herself with quiet strength. She was not someone who overshared, nor someone who looked for attention. Her focus was on Xander. Her life was work and motherhood. And even when things got difficult, she continued to move forward. But what she kept private had turned out to be far more serious than most realized. A GoFundMe was created to support Xander, helping to cover therapy costs and basic needs. The community contributed, with friends and strangers sharing the link, posting tributes and committing to helping the family in any way they could. But money could only solve logistical problems, not the emotional wreckage left behind.
This is a donation, all proceeds tonight. Whether you are donating at the door, if you are purchasing at the bar, everything will be going to the family.
Please come out and support this family. They lost a loved one. They need the community support.
An advocate, not just for her grandson, but for domestic violence awareness. She urged others to recognize red flags, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to support women trying to leave dangerous situations. Because for Brianna, the signs had been there. But the ending still came too soon. The funeral was private but well attended. Family and friends gathered to say goodbye, not just to mourn, but to honor Brianna's life. She was laid to rest surrounded by the people who knew her best. There were no cameras, no reporters, just the people who had loved her most. It was the final chapter of a life cut short, but not forgotten. Even now, nearly 2 years after her death, people still ask how it could have happened. How could someone harm the mother of their own child? How could a person walk out of an apartment and leave an infant behind with the person they just killed? These are the questions that still have no answers. Brianna wasn't weak. She wasn't passive. She was trying to protect herself and her child. She was working, parenting, and quietly building a plan for independence. She did everything many victims of abuse try to do. But in the end, her efforts were cut off before she could escape. If you know someone who is dealing with emotional or physical abuse, do not wait. Encourage them to talk to someone. Help them find resources. If you hear shouting or see signs of bruising or notice isolation, say something.
There's another case just like it, and this one has a famous face attached to it. That's how prosecutors describe the final minutes of a young girl's life. He goes by the name D4VD, and his real name is David Anthony Burke. He's a 21-year-old singer who blew up on the internet and became famous for hits like Romantic Homicide and Young, Talented, had a major record deal and a world tour on the way. To his fans, he looked like the dream, the regular kid who made it big off pure talent. But according to prosecutors in Los Angeles, hiding behind that clean image was a man who had been carrying on a secret relationship with a child. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She grew up in Lake Elsinore, California, a working-class town roughly 80 miles outside of Los Angeles, and she was a bright, music-loving teenager. She was a young one below the legal age, and prosecutors say David Burke had been circling her life since she was far too young to even understand what was happening to her. To the people who loved her, Celeste was just a kid still figuring out who she was. And to the outside world, she barely registered at all, which is part of what makes this so painful. When her family first reported her missing, the case was treated as a runaway, the kind of report that too often gets pushed to the bottom of the pile. And the most chilling part is how much of David Burke's own public art seemed to circle around exactly this kind of story. He and Celeste shared the same little shh tattoo inked on the same finger of their hands, and David had an unreleased song with Celeste's name on it that had been floating around online. His biggest hit was literally titled Romantic Homicide. At the time, fans wrote it all off as moody, edgy songwriting. Looking back now, a lot of them can't unsee it.
The victim and defendant met in January 2022 when she was 11 years old. Detectives learned the victim had been reported missing to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department by her family who live in Lake Elsinore in February and April of 2024. So the Riverside County Sheriff's Department contacted the defendant. They phoned the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, called David on February the 17th, 2024. So all this talk of people emailed in and said to David, you need to send this girl home, she's missing. Well, the police, not the LAPD, but the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, right, called David. They identified a phone number in the victim's phone records belonging to him. And during the call, the defendant claimed, so David said he'd last spoken to the victim on February the 13th or 14th, but said he was unaware that she was a minor or that she had been reported missing.
She was only 11 years old when they first met, and that's the number you can't let slide past you. Prosecutors allege the sexual relationship began in November of 2023, when Celeste was just years from the standard legal age, that it involved the continuous intimate abuse of a young one, and that a significant amount of intimate abuse material was later found on his phone and his iCloud account. Her family tried to pull her back more than once. Celeste was reported missing by her family in Lake Elsinore back in 2024, and each time she either returned or was located. At one point, authorities even went knocking on David's door during a welfare check, and the way he answered them tells you how deep the deception ran.
So the LASD deputies went to David's home that night at 8:15 p.m. and informed him the victim was a 13-year-old runaway. David would claim he was unaware she was a minor and had only met the victim once in person in November 2023. However, defendant showed deputies a yearbook photo of the victim that he had on his cell phone. Although he claimed to be unaware of where the victim was at the time she returned home 2 days later. So was she in the property? Was she at the other property that was allegedly owned or rented by David during this time? This is crazy, and I think unfortunately this is going to be one of many examples that we're going to see where the police actually made contact with David before this tragedy was allowed to happen.
And even after the police told him plainly that she was 13, prosecutors say he didn't back off. He found a way around her parents.
David drove to Lake Elsinore and paid a junior high school student in the victim's class $1,000 to give the victim a cell phone that David purchased so they could stay in contact. That is so creepy. And we're about to read something that's actually blown my mind.
He paid one of her classmates $1,000 to sneak a secret phone to her, just so he could keep talking to her behind her family's back. Prosecutors say that over the next stretch of time, Celeste spent long periods with him and even traveled with him to places like Las Vegas, London, and Texas to meet his family. A grown man with a record deal, moving a young teenager across state lines and across an entire ocean, while the adults around him, prosecutors say, either helped or looked the other way. For her mother, Maria, none of the fame or the headlines ever mattered. She just wanted her daughter back, and when the worst news finally came, she said the only thing a mother in that position can say. She had already told reporters that her daughter's boyfriend was named David, and that I just want answers for my baby, and the timing of everything is impossible to ignore. David's debut album, titled Withered, was set to come out on April 25th, only 2 days after prosecutors say he killed her. He was standing right on the edge of the biggest moment of his entire career, and prosecutors say the one person who could rip it all away from him was a teenage girl he'd spent years hiding from the world.
I media trained you.
No, you did.
That's controversial.
It's controversial of raping kids.
Really good.
Okay,
It's been a good one. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Mwah, 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 mwah. Oh my. Delete everything. Delete everything. Everything goes.
What makes this even harder to stomach is how many chances there were to stop it. Records show sheriff's deputies had been in contact about Celeste more than once in the years before her death, visiting the family home and even reaching David directly during the search for her. Each time, prosecutors say, he talked his way out of it, insisting he barely knew her. The warning signs were sitting there in plain sight, scattered across police reports and phone records, and still she slipped through every crack until it was far too late to save her. The two of them broke up in November of 2024, but they stayed in contact, and that lingering contact is what prosecutors say set the stage for her death. Because by the spring of 2025, Celeste was tired of protecting his secret, and she'd the power to blow his whole world apart.
She is jealous about the fact that David is seeing other women, and she threatens him and says she's basically threatening to go public and reveal the fact that they have been in a relationship,
which she
that he
said,
has been having sex with them.
Which she says is going to ruin his career.
Right.
And so that is for
That's
the prosecution's view, that's the trigger for what comes next.
Because the other part of it is that on the 25th, he had his first album coming out.
Prosecutors paint those final weeks as a slow build towards something terrible. The messages between them, they say, had shifted from a hidden romance into a standoff, with Celeste holding the one card that could destroy him and David watching his career clock tick down toward release day. So on the night of April 22nd, going into the 23rd, prosecutors say he pulled her toward him using the exact same cold trick Chukwuebuka Nwobodo used on Felicia. He ordered the car himself. She was picked up at 8:40 in the evening and dropped at his Hollywood Hills home right around 10:10 at night. Prosecutors say he was lying in wait, and that shortly after she walked through the door, he stabbed her multiple times and watched her die without ever picking up a phone to call for help. Then, they say, he started texting her phone, asking where she was, acting as though she were still alive, somewhere out in the world. That was the very first move in a cover-up that would stretch on for months. And just like the first case, the truly disturbing part is what prosecutors say he did next. Just like Chukwuebuka Nwobodo, prosecutors say David Burke didn't crumble after the killing. he went shopping.
And then things get weird because he starts ordering some things.
Well, this is where it looks really
Yes.
incriminating.
That's right. This is when he starts purchasing items to, according to prosecutors, dismember the body and start to dispose of it. He purchases a shovel from Home Depot that he has delivered via Postmates. He, a few days after that, purchases 2 chainsaws on Amazon. He does so under an alias, another name, Victoria Mendez. They then say a couple days after that, he purchases a body bag, a laundry bag, and an inflatable blue pool.
He bought a shovel, and then a couple of days later, 2 chainsaws, all ordered under a fake name, so nothing would trace back to him. Prosecutors also say he bought a body bag, laundry bags, and an inflatable pool, and that the dismemberment happened in the garage of his home. That inflatable pool isn't a throwaway detail, because it became one of the most damning pieces in the entire case.
They then say a couple days after that, he purchases a body bag, a laundry bag, and an inflatable blue pool. Now, this is what's fascinating about the blue pool is when the body was discovered and it was dismembered, there's a note in the autopsy report that there were blue plastic fragments embedded in some of the body parts. The forensics team by the prosecutors has now matched, they say they've matched those blue fragments to the pool that was put down to protect the floor where he was dismembering the body.
So a lot of incriminating evidence as to disposing of the body. So
never did.
Investigators say he later drove up toward the Santa Barbara area to a remote spot to dump some of her belongings, and that at another point, he even ordered a high-heat burn cage. All the while, he kept living his public life, promoting his new album and heading out on tour as though absolutely nothing had happened. But a body doesn't stay hidden forever, and the way this one surfaced is almost impossible to believe. On September 8th of 2025, workers at a Los Angeles tow yard noticed a horrible smell coming from an impounded Tesla, and when the LAPT opened the front trunk, they found Celeste's decomposed and dismembered remains inside. The car was registered to David Burke. He had been the last person to drive it, and then simply left it sitting on a public street until parking enforcement flagged it and towed it away. Her body had been trapped in that trunk for months through the brutal summer heat.
And that body was later identified as a 14-year-old girl, her name, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Her body was in the front storage area of the Tesla, that's like the trunk of the vehicle, and it was in a state of decomposition, law enforcement said. Investigators have said that Celeste may have been dead for weeks before she was discovered. The teen's mom told investigators that she was last seen and heard from in April of 2024. So here we are in April of 2026 with David now under arrest in connection to her. The last time she was seen alive, according to her mom, all the way back roughly 2 years ago. Her mom also added another point about her daughter, and it was that she had a boyfriend named David.
The details of how that car even ended up there make the whole thing worse. The Tesla had been sitting abandoned on a public street long enough that parking enforcement marked its tires before it was finally towed and impounded. It was the smell and the flies that pushed a tow yard worker to finally call the police.
Tonight, more than a week after a body was found inside an impounded Tesla registered to the singer who goes by the stage name David, Los Angeles investigators identifying the remains as 15-year-old Celeste Rivas, the same girl who was reported missing last year, according to the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. Police first found the teen's decomposed body on September 8th after being called to a Hollywood tow yard because of a foul odor coming from the Tesla, which was impounded after a person reported the car abandoned. Law enforcement sources say the remains were not intact, and according to the medical examiner, it appeared the girl, who is described as having wavy black hair and weighing about 71 pounds, had been dead inside the Tesla for an extended period of time. The singer David, whose real name is David Anthony Burke, rose to fame on TikTok and is currently on tour. A spokesperson for the artist did not respond to NBC News' request for comment today, but last week said the 20-year-old was fully cooperating with the authorities. The LAPD is not calling the death criminal, saying in a statement that at this time, the agency does not have a crime classification from the coroner as to the mode or manner of death. Thus, we do not have any suspect information at this time. And right now, police have not said if they believe the singer David knew or ever had contact with the victim. We are just learning that his show scheduled for tonight in Seattle has now been canceled.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
And when investigators went through what was inside, one detail stood out as especially cruel. Her remains had been bagged and dismembered, and her left ring and pinky fingers, the ones that carried her tattoos, had been cut off and were never recovered. Prosecutors would later point to that as part of a calculated effort to erase who she was. The county medical examiner ruled her death a homicide caused by multiple penetrating wounds. Her family, who had spent more than a year not knowing, could finally bury her, even as the questions about who did this hung heavy over the whole town. For a long stretch after the discovery, it looked like nothing was moving, and the public grew furious, wondering why a famous man was still walking around free while Celeste lay in a morgue. And in those weeks, prosecutors and the public watched David Burke behave in ways that only deepened the suspicion. He canceled his tour, went silent on social media, and moved to transfer 2 of his Texas homes into a trust for his mother, while the investigation swirled around him. By the time the charges finally came down, the district attorney didn't soften a single word, calling what allegedly happened to Celeste horrific and gruesome.
Last year is when the remains of this 15-year-old girl were found in the trunk of David's Tesla while he was on tour, and he's never been charged or arrested in connection to this apparent murder. But now in these new documents obtained by NBC News, we see that he is the target of this grand jury investigation. And we know that family members of his have appeared before a grand jury earlier this month on February 11th. And, you know, when a grand jury convenes, this is something that's highly secretive. You never know typically when the date is going to be. And that's when the grand jury listens to evidence brought by the state's prosecutors, and they decide whether or not to bring charges. And again, he has not been charged with any crime in connection to this teen's murder. NBC News has reached out to his legal team for comment, and they have not responded to us yet on these documents. But again, incredibly significant, because this is the first time that we've now learned that officially prosecutors are looking at David as the target for this grand jury investigation.
A grand jury was hearing evidence in secret, and prosecutors were carefully locking in witnesses from inside his own circle so that nobody could turn shaky later at trial. One of his own friends was even arrested in another state for refusing to cooperate with that grand jury, which tells you just how seriously the prosecution was taking this.
We are following major breaking news tonight. Singer David has been arrested in connection to the murder of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas, according to the LAPD. This is a case that stretches back more than 2 years to when she was last seen alive. Her decomposed body found in the trunk of David's Tesla late last year.
Then, on April 16th of 2026, it finally happened. And when officers came to take him in, they didn't take a single chance. David Burke was arrested at a Hollywood Hills home, and days later he was formally charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances, along with the continuous intimate abuse of a young one and the unlawful mutilation of human remains. Those special circumstances matter because they include the murder of a witness and murder for financial gain.
The footage shows officers heavily armed carrying guns, some wearing tactical helmets and protective gear, underscoring just how seriously authorities were treating the arrest of the singer. They're taking him out like he's El Davido, like he's El Chapo.
David has pleaded not guilty to all of it. He's being held without bail, and his defense insists the evidence will show he didn't cause Celeste's death. Unlike the first case, this one is now headed for a courtroom, where a preliminary hearing will decide whether it moves on to a full trial. And it's worth saying clearly one more time, these are still allegations, and under the law, David Burke is innocent until a jury decides otherwise. This isn't a case that's going to be over quickly either. The pile of evidence is so massive, reportedly tens of terabytes of digital material, that the defense asked for more time just to work through it, and the preliminary hearing got pushed back into the following month. For Celeste's family, who finally laid her to rest in the fall of 2025, every delay is another stretch of waiting on the one question that has always mattered most to them, which is how a grown man was ever allowed to get that close to their little girl in the first place. When we decide that certain girls and women matter a little bit less, we hand men like this exactly the cover they need to do the unthinkable and walk away clean. Felicia Johnson only wanted to enjoy her birthday. Celeste Rivas Hernandez only wanted to grow up. Neither one of them got the chance, and the very least the rest of us can do is say their names out loud and refuse to look away. Let me know what you think about both cases in the comments section. Also, click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this. See you in the next one.